Hey, how's it going everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and today's video I want to show you 3 different ways that you can improve your Swiss poster designs in Illustrator. Before we get started though, please make sure you are subscribed to support the channel. A large percentage of people that watch these videos are not actually subscribed, so please make sure that you are. It really does help me out. So the very first thing I want to talk to you about is strengthening your grid system, and that's really first and foremost making sure that you are using a grid. Now, can you design a Swiss design poster without using a grid? Well, sure you can, but let me show you something. So let's go ahead and type out, let's just do the Sundays. I love the Sundays, and if you haven't listened to the Sundays, then definitely check them out. And let's just, for the sake of this video, we'll just use Helvetica. You know what? Let's use Newhouse Grotesque instead. We have a lot more options there. Okay, so let's say that we're even following our formula. Okay, so we are going to set a base size of 120, and then let's take our secondary type and multiply that by 30%, and then our tertiary type, multiply that by 60%. So here's our actual formula that we are using for our Swiss design posters that I talked about in this video. So if you haven't seen that, then check that out right up there. And let's say that you are going to do something like just a circle, you know, that kind of represents the moon that's on their last album, Static and Silence. So we'll just go with that. All right, I'm just going to copy and paste this in front, and we're going to bring this down to about 6 inches or so, and go to our Pathfinder and knock this out. So we just have like a big stroke right here. And I'm just going to quickly lay down a background. We're just going to do like a blue background. I'm going to select everything except for the background and make everything white. So let's say Static and Silence. And I need to look up the release date. So September 22nd, 1997. So let's just go ahead and throw that down there. So as I'm putting together the composition, I'm going to put it together without using a grid and going strictly very traditionally when it comes to placing these elements on the page. So let's go ahead and put this at the bottom. And I've got to put this right at the bottom left. Okay, so we're going to move this over by 1 inch. And we're going to bring it up by 1 inch. But actually, I'm going to go -2 inches here. And let's take this circle right here and just put it in the corner. I'm just throwing things together willy-nilly. I'm not being too precise here. I'm not really worrying about that too much. In fact, what we should probably do is, since the album is the focus, we should make Static and Silence the big letters, and then the Sundays the secondary type. Okay, and now what we're going to do is I'm just going to space these apart evenly. So let's say we've got a 1/2 inch exactly in between them, okay? Not the best Swiss design poster I've ever seen, but also not the worst either. I've definitely seen worse. But the whole idea of this is that we put this together very quickly without using any type of a grid system. So what you want to do is you want that grid system because it does give structure to your design, even if you can't see the grids. So I have an Illustrator document right here. This is called Swiss Grid, and this is how I've divided everything up into sections here. So for our Swiss design posters, we have 8 subsections going across, and 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 sections going down. So these are all 12 subsections. So it's 8 by 12 going all across. And then we also have gutters here. Now, gutters are something that you can use really on a case-by-case basis. You don't really have to worry too much about always adhering to the gutter. It depends on your overall design. Sometimes you want to have a little bit of spacing in between some elements. It just depends on what you're putting together. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go up here to View, Guides, and Unlock Guides. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to hit Copy, and we're going to paste this in our document. I'm going to make sure this is all grouped together so that we can go to our Align panel and click on Horizontal Align Center and Vertical Align Center. So that way, this is exactly lined up with our document. So as you can see, for the most part, there are a lot of elements here that are following the grid, but they're not precise. So that's really what I want you to do, is I want you to follow the grid precisely, and I'll show you exactly how to do that. So what we're going to do is go up here to View, Guides, and Lock Guides. And if you want your main type to be at the bottom, then let's go ahead and set the baseline of this to the bottom grid. And when I say the type to the bottom of the grid right there, what we want to do is look at where the baseline of the type is. So the baseline of the type is actually right here at the bottom of this A. And this T right here has a slight overshoot or you could also call it a descender. And then coming from here on this side, that left side of the top part of the S right here is actually going to be where the kind of the vertical baseline is supposed to be. And this will actually overshoot past this line right here. So then we'll just move on to our next piece of type, which is the Sundays. And let's move this right here to where that baseline meets with that grid line. And then we'll do the same thing here. We'll just move this here and then move this up here to this baseline. And we need our letter M right there to tell us exactly where that is. Okay, and now let's go up here to our circle, or our moon, and align this exactly to our grid. And it is exactly hitting those lines right there. And then we will hold down Shift. And then you can have it stay right here, or you can bring it right here. So just doing that has already given this poster more structure. We had those lines there before we had the grid lines down, and they weren't exactly lined up with each other and not following that grid. Now they are following the grid. Even if we do have spacing that is larger between these two and smaller between these two, it still is following a structure. And believe it or not, our eyes see that structure whether or not we see the grid lines. So how are some ways that you can kind of move this around a little bit? Well, you can just move around your largest one right here, your primary type. We can align that with this. And let's say that you only want a primary and a secondary. What you would do in that case is, let's go ahead and hide the grids. And I'm just going to use my eyedropper and click on the Sundays right there, and that's going to make that the same exact level as the other one. And then what we can do is throw this right here, aligning to this grid line. And we've got a primary and a secondary type size while still following a grid structure. But what I would do in this case, just for composition, is just to move this down a little bit closer to here. So that way we have some negative space happening. And it's perfectly okay for your type to be a little bit higher on the page. It doesn't have to be all the way down at the bottom. And then we also have this nice composition here. So overall, just by adding a grid system has really cleaned up the structure of this poster. All right, number 2 is to refine your typography. So believe it or not, I have seen many cases where we have something like this. Technically, these are 3 different fonts that we're working with. And when you're working with a font, especially in a Swiss grid system, you want to make sure that it has a good flow and that it's continuous and consistent across your system, especially if you're doing multiple posters within the same system. So for example, this right here, we've got Newhouse Grotesque, and then I've got Inter, which is actually very similar to Newhouse Grotesque, so I probably should have used a different font. And then of course I just threw in Times New Roman just for the heck of it. But I have seen situations like this before where a designer has probably started off using Helvetica or a different font and then is trying to introduce a separate font. Sometimes it could be completely different from your primary font, and then other times it could be too similar to your primary font. What you want to do is have some kind of a consistency there, and if you're going to use a mixture of fonts, make sure that they complement each other. So what we're going to do is make these two match our main type, but I want to show you another little secret. So for our primary type, let's go ahead and change this to black. And then for our secondary type, let's change this to medium. And then we're going to make this a tertiary type. So we're going to change this to something a little bit lighter. Maybe like Roman or something like that. So just by doing that, you can see that there is a clear hierarchy between these 3 pieces of type. Obviously, I wouldn't leave the composition this way, but you can see exactly what I mean just by changing the weight. It's just like that meme that says you will read this first, and then this, and then this, and that's exactly what your goal is as a designer, is to direct the reader's eye to where you want it to go. And since Swiss design posters are all about clear communication, that's exactly what you're going to do, is you're going to communicate using your type and the way that you lay it out on the page. So here's just a little pro tip. Less is always more. One font is almost always enough, and just use it in different weights. And just remember this, typography is your main tool. Treat it like design, not decoration. And number 3 is using color with restraint. Now, does that mean that you can only use 2 colors on your posters? Absolutely not. But you also don't want to do something like this either. So what you want to do is you want to refine it. And let's say that we want to use more than just one color. Obviously, up to this point, we've been using white. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make our circle like a silver color right here. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that there's plenty of contrast between this and your type. You don't want these two colors to get confused with each other. So I'm actually going to go a little bit darker with this. And then for the smaller type, we can actually match that same color. So I'm going to use my eyedropper tool to do that. And now let's just change the composition around just a little bit. That way we can get a little bit of a clearer communication. Now, one thing that I want to tack on to our earlier discussion about grids is that it doesn't have to always adhere exactly to the grid line itself. So what you can do is something like this. This is kind of like cheating a little bit. But what we're going to do is bring this all the way up to this top grid line. And now how do you determine how far you move this down? You could go all the way down here. You could go to the halfway point. But one thing that I like to do is to figure out the spacing between these two lines right here. And then I'm going to divide that entire height by 3. And now I'm just going to move my text down to where the baseline will match up with the bottom of that square. And to see that purple line that we just saw, you want to make sure that your smart guides are turned on, and that's under your view menu. So now we can just get rid of that square right there, and we've got really nice consistent spacing between our secondary and our tertiary type. So this right here is a great example of using color with restraint. We've got a couple of different colors that are going on here, and the color is also helping with the hierarchy of our type. And just for the heck of it, we'll change both of these colors to maybe like a yellow or something like that, just to give you a different visual sense and show you that it still works. So here's a pro tip when it comes to colors. Start all of your posters in black and white and then add color from there. Most of the time, one bold accent color will do the trick just fine, and then other times you want to add in some other colors as well. But just kind of feel it out, but start with everything in black and white first. Minimal color in your poster designs will make it timeless and powerful. So just remember, strengthen your grid system, refine your typography, and use color with restraint. Using all 3 of these techniques is going to vastly improve your Swiss poster designs, and I can't wait to see what you do with them. If you found this video helpful, please make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.